These white nurses laughed and mocked a pregnant black mom as she gave birth in the hospital in Chicago. What do you think happens to them the moment her husband steps in and sees them laughing at his pregnant wife? Stick with us on this one, and you will find out. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh white light across the sterile delivery room. Danielle Brooks gripped the hospital bed railing, her knuckles pale against her brown skin as another contraction tore through her body. She'd been timing them for the past 3 hours, and they were coming faster now, closer together, each one building into a wave that left her breathless and trembling. "Please," she managed to say, her voice strained but controlled. "I need someone to check on the baby. Something doesn't feel right." The nurse at the monitoring station barely glanced up from her phone. Karen Whitfield, according to her name badge, had blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and wore an expression of practiced indifference. She sighed, the kind of exaggerated exhale that made it clear she considered this interruption an annoyance. "You're fine," Karen said, not even bothering to look at the monitors. "First-time mothers always think something's wrong. Your body knows what to do." Danielle felt another contraction building, this one stronger than the last. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, the technique she'd learned in the birthing classes she'd attended religiously every Tuesday evening after work. She was a teacher at Lincoln Elementary, where she'd spent the last 6 years helping third graders learn to read and believe in themselves. She knew how to stay calm under pressure. She knew how to keep her composure when things got difficult. But this felt different. This felt wrong. "I've been having contractions for hours," Danielle said, opening her eyes and trying to catch Karen's attention. "And the baby hasn't moved as much in the last hour. Can you please just check the heart rate?" Karen finally looked up, but her expression wasn't one of concern. It was irritation mixed with something else, something that made Danielle's stomach tighten in a way that had nothing to do with labor. The nurse exchanged a glance with her colleague, Emily Ross, a younger woman with auburn hair who'd been standing near the door, scrolling through her own phone. "They always exaggerate," Karen muttered, just loud enough for Danielle to hear. Emily smirked, turning away to hide her reaction. Danielle's hands tightened on the railing. She'd heard that comment. She knew she'd heard it correctly. But another contraction was coming, and she had to focus on breathing through it, on staying calm, on trusting that these medical professionals would do their jobs even if they didn't seem particularly invested in doing them well. The contraction peaked, and Danielle couldn't hold back a low groan. The pain was manageable, but the intensity was increasing, and the fear that something might be wrong with her baby was worse than any physical discomfort. "Can you please check?" she asked again when the contraction subsided. "Just to be sure?" Karen stood up with deliberate slowness, making a show of how inconvenient this request was. She walked over to the monitoring equipment, glanced at the screen for approximately 3 seconds, and then turned back to Danielle. "Everything's fine," she said flatly. "Your baby's heart rate is normal. You need to relax. Stress isn't good for the baby." But Danielle had been watching Karen's face during those 3 seconds, and she'd seen the way the nurse's eyes had barely focused on the screen. She hadn't actually looked at the readings. She'd just performed the motions, going through the bare minimum of what her job required. "Are you sure?" Danielle pressed, hating how desperate she sounded, but unable to stop herself. "Because I really feel like something's different, I'm sure," Karen said, her voice sharp now. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I think I know when something's actually wrong versus when someone's just being dramatic." The word dramatic hung in the air like a slap. Danielle felt her face grow hot, felt the familiar sting of being dismissed, of having her concerns treated as overreaction rather than valid medical input. She'd experienced it before, in different contexts, but never when the stakes were this high. "I'm not being dramatic," Danielle said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm trying to make sure my baby is okay." Emily laughed softly from her position near the door. It wasn't a full laugh, just a quiet exhale of amusement, but Danielle heard it clearly. The two nurses exchanged another look, one that communicated volumes without words. They thought she was overreacting. They thought she was wasting their time. And beneath that, running like a dark current through their interactions, was something else that Danielle didn't want to name, but couldn't ignore. The delivery room door opened,
and Danielle's head turned hopefully, thinking it might be her husband returning from the call he'd had to take. Marcus had been with her all morning, holding her hand, timing contractions, speaking calmly to the medical staff. But it had only been 20 minutes since he'd stepped out to handle what he'd called a work situation, and Danielle knew he wouldn't be back quite yet. Instead, a different nurse poked her head in, spoke briefly to Karen in a voice too low for Danielle to hear, and then disappeared again. Karen nodded, checked her watch, and then turned back to her station without saying anything to Danielle. Another contraction was building, this one harder than the others. Danielle gripped the railing and closed her eyes, focusing on breathing through it. She counted in her head, the way the birthing class instructor had taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 8. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 8. When it passed, she was sweating, and her hospital gown clung to her back. She pressed the call button on the side of her bed, the one that was supposed to summon help when patients needed assistance. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, holding it down for several seconds. Still nothing. Karen was sitting at her station, looking at her phone again. Emily had moved to stand beside her, and both of them were looking at something on Karen's screen, their heads close together. One of them said something, and the other laughed quietly. "Excuse me," Danielle called out, her voice stronger now, cutting through the hum of medical equipment and hushed conversation. "I pressed the call button. We heard it," Karen said without looking up. "We're right here. You don't need to keep pressing it." "Then can someone please help me?" Danielle asked. "The contractions are getting worse, and I'd like someone to check my progress." Karen sighed again, that same exaggerated sound of someone being deeply inconvenienced. She set her phone down and walked over to Danielle's bed, but her movements were slow, reluctant, as if every step required tremendous effort. "You're going to have contractions," Karen said, her tone condescending. "That's how labor works. You can't call us every 5 minutes because you're uncomfortable. We have other patients. I'm not calling you because I'm uncomfortable," Danielle said, working hard to keep her voice calm and reasonable. "I'm calling you because I think something might be changing, and I want someone to check." "When was your last check?" Karen asked, glancing at the chart. 3 hours ago, then it hasn't been long enough. First labors take time. You need to be patient." Danielle wanted to argue, wanted to insist that someone examine her, but another contraction was coming, and she had to focus all her energy on breathing through it. This one was different, sharper, with a quality that felt like progress. She could feel pressure building, could feel her body preparing for something significant. When it passed, she was gasping, and tears had started to leak from the corners of her eyes. Not from the pain exactly, but from the overwhelming feeling of being alone, of being unheard, of trying to advocate for herself and her baby while being treated like an inconvenience. "That one was different," she said when she could speak again. "Please. I think things are progressing." Karen rolled her eyes, an expression so quick that Danielle almost missed it, but it was there, unmistakable in its contempt. The nurse moved to the foot of the bed with obvious reluctance and performed what felt like a perfunctory examination. "You're at 7 centimeters, Karen announced, her tone suggesting this was somehow Danielle's fault. "Finally making some progress. But you're not ready to push yet, so you need to stop panicking." 7 centimeters. That was significant progress from the 4 centimeters she'd been at 3 hours ago. That meant things were moving faster than expected. That meant she'd been right to call for help. But Karen was already walking away, returning to her station without any further instruction or reassurance. Emily was typing something into a computer, and neither of them seemed particularly concerned about the fact that Danielle's labor was accelerating. "How long until I can push?" Danielle called after them. "When you're at 10 centimeters, Karen said without turning around. "Could be another hour. Could be 3. Every labor is different." Danielle lay back against the pillows, exhausted and frustrated and frightened in a way that went beyond normal first-time mother anxiety. She'd read everything she could about childbirth. She'd taken the classes. She'd prepared herself mentally and physically for this experience. But nothing had prepared her for the feeling of being dismissed by the very people who were supposed to be helping her bring her child safely into the world. She thought about Marcus, wondered how much longer his call would take, hoped he'd be back soon. Her husband had been her rock throughout this pregnancy, especially during the complications that had started in the second trimester. She'd had episodes of high blood pressure that her previous obstetrician had monitored carefully, adjusting medications and scheduling extra ultrasounds to make sure the baby was developing properly. But that had been at a different hospital, one where her insurance no longer provided coverage. When Marcus had changed jobs 6 months ago, they'd been forced to switch to a new insurance plan, one that required them to use this hospital, this facility, where the nurses looked at her with barely concealed annoyance and treated her concerns as hysteria. Marcus had been calm about the change, had researched the hospital thoroughly, had assured her that it had good ratings and a solid reputation. But he'd also done something that had seemed odd at the time. He'd insisted they keep detailed records of every appointment, every interaction with medical staff, every concern that was raised, and how it was addressed. Just in case, he'd said, in that careful way he had of preparing for problems he hoped would never materialize. At the time, Danielle had thought he was being overly cautious, perhaps even a little paranoid. Now, lying in this delivery room with nurses who couldn't be bothered to hide their contempt, she understood why he'd wanted that documentation. Another contraction hit, this one so intense that Danielle couldn't stop the cry that escaped her lips. It felt different from the others, felt like her body was demanding something, like progress was happening whether the nurses paid attention or not. "Please," she gasped when it passed. "Something's changing. I need someone to check again." "You were just checked 5 minutes ago," Karen said from her station, not even bothering to look up this time. "You need to calm down. All this stress isn't good for you or the baby." The words were a knife, sharp and deliberate. They placed the blame squarely on Danielle, suggesting that any problems that might arise would be her fault for being too stressed, too dramatic, too demanding of the medical professionals who were supposed to be caring for her. Danielle closed her eyes and focused on breathing. She couldn't let them see how much their treatment was affecting her. She couldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her break down. She was stronger than this. She'd dealt with difficult situations before, had navigated systems that weren't designed with her best interests in mind. She could get through this. But then another contraction came, and this one brought with it a sensation that terrified her. Something felt wrong, distinctly and unmistakably wrong. Not just different, not just intense, but wrong in a way that made alarm bells go off in her head. "I need help," she said, her voice urgent now. "Right now. Please. Something's not right." Karen stood up with an exasperated groan, as if Danielle had asked her to climb a mountain rather than walk across a room. She approached the bed slowly, her expression making it clear that she expected to find nothing wrong, that this was just another false alarm from an over-anxious first-time mother. But when Karen checked the monitors, her expression changed. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around her eyes, but Danielle saw it and felt her heart rate spike. "What is it?" Danielle asked. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Karen said quickly, but her hands were moving faster now, adjusting the monitoring equipment, repositioning the sensors on Danielle's belly. "The baby just moved, and we lost the heartbeat on the monitor. It happens sometimes. But you found it again?" Danielle pressed, trying to see the screen, trying to understand what the numbers meant. "I'm working on it," Karen said, her voice tight now, the casual dismissiveness replaced by something that looked like concern, but felt like irritation at having her competence questioned. Emily had moved closer, was standing beside Karen now, both of them staring at the monitor. They were speaking to each other in low voices, medical terminology that Danielle couldn't fully follow, but that sounded serious. "Is my baby okay?" Danielle asked, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "Please tell me what's happening." "Your baby is fine," Karen said, but she was moving toward the door now, signaling to Emily. "I'm going to get the doctor. You need to stay calm." And then she was gone, leaving Emily alone with Danielle. The younger nurse looked uncomfortable, uncertain, as if she wasn't sure what she was supposed to do in this situation. "What's happening?" Danielle asked her directly. "Why did she go get the doctor?" "It's just a precaution," Emily said, but she wouldn't meet Danielle's eyes. "The baby's heart rate dropped a little, but it's probably nothing serious. It happens sometimes during labor." "How much did it drop?" "I don't know exactly. I'm not the one monitoring." Danielle wanted to scream, wanted to demand answers, wanted to grab this young nurse by her scrubs and force her to explain exactly what was happening with her baby. But another contraction was building, and with it came that overwhelming sensation of pressure, of her body pushing whether she was ready or not. "I think I need to push," Danielle gasped. "I think the baby's coming." Emily's eyes widened, and she rushed to the foot of the bed, checking quickly. When she looked up, her face had gone pale. "Don't push," she said urgently. "The doctor isn't here yet. You need to wait." "I can't wait," Danielle said through gritted teeth. "My body is pushing. I can't stop it." "You have to try," Emily insisted. "Pant through the contractions. Don't push until the doctor gets here." Danielle tried to follow the instruction, tried to pant instead of push, but her body had other ideas. The contractions were coming one on top of another now, with barely any break between them, and each one brought with it an overwhelming urge to bear down, to push, to get this baby out. Where was Marcus? Where was the doctor? Where was anyone who could help her navigate this terrifying situation? The door burst open, and Karen returned with an older man in a white coat. Dr. Alan Pierce, according to the name embroidered on his jacket. He had gray hair and tired eyes, and he moved with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd delivered thousands of babies and no longer found the process particularly remarkable. "What do we have?" he asked Karen, not Danielle. 38 weeks, first-time mother, progressing faster than expected. Karen rattled off. Baby's heart rate dropped to 90 for about 30 seconds, then recovered to 120. "It's fluctuating now." Dr. Pierce moved to the monitors, studied them for a moment, then came to examine Danielle without introducing himself or explaining what he was seeing. "You're fully dilated," he announced. "We're going to have this baby soon. When the next contraction comes, I want you to push." Finally, permission to do what her body had been demanding. Danielle nodded, gripping the bed rails, preparing herself. But there was something in Dr. Pierce's expression, something in the way Karen and Emily were moving around the room with sudden urgency that told her this wasn't a routine delivery anymore. "Is my baby okay?" she asked again, needing to hear someone tell her the truth. "We're going to take good care of both of you," Dr. Pierce said, which wasn't really an answer at all. The next contraction hit, and with it came the doctor's instruction to push. Danielle bore down with everything she had, feeling her body work in ways she'd never experienced before. It was overwhelming, all-consuming, frightening, and powerful at the same time. "Good," Dr. Pierce said, again on the next one. The contractions were relentless now, giving her barely any time to recover between pushes. She could hear the monitor beeping, could hear Karen and Emily speaking in urgent tones, could feel the pressure and pain of her body trying to bring her child into the world. "I need my husband," Danielle gasped between contractions. "Someone please get my husband." "We'll call him in a minute," Karen said dismissively. "Right now you need to focus on pushing." But Danielle wanted Marcus here. She needed him here. He was supposed to be with her for this, was supposed to be holding her hand and helping her through it. Where was he? Why was his work call taking so long? Another contraction, another push, and this time Dr. Pierce's expression changed. "I can see the head," he announced. "One more big push, and we should have the baby." Danielle gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed with everything in her. She felt the baby move, felt that strange sensation of something leaving her body, and then she heard it. The most beautiful sound in the world. Her baby crying. Tears streamed down Danielle's face as she heard that cry, loud and strong and unmistakably alive. Her baby was here. Her baby was crying. Everything was going to be okay. But then she noticed the silence in the room. The medical staff weren't celebrating, weren't congratulating her, weren't placing the baby on her chest for skin-to-skin contact the way all the birthing books said they should. Instead, Dr. Pierce was moving quickly with the baby, and Karen was following him to the warming station on the other side of the room. "Wait," Danielle said, trying to sit up, trying to see what was happening. "Is my baby okay? Why aren't you bringing her to me? Just need to clear the airway and check a few things." Dr. Pierce called back. "Give us a minute, a minute." He wanted her to wait a minute to meet the child she'd just spent 29 hours of labor bringing into the world. The child she'd carried for 38 weeks, through complications and concern and constant worry. "Please," Danielle said, her voice breaking. "Please tell me my baby's okay." Emily was still with her, cleaning up, attending to the medical procedures that came after delivery. She avoided Danielle's eyes. "Is it a boy or a girl?" Danielle asked, realizing that no one had even told her that most basic information. "A girl," Emily said quietly. "You have a daughter." "A daughter." Danielle had a daughter. She should be holding her right now, should be looking into her face, counting her fingers and toes, beginning that crucial bonding process. But instead, she was lying here alone while strangers examined her child across the room. The baby's cries had stopped, which somehow felt worse than if she'd continued crying. Danielle strained to see what was happening at the warming station, but Karen and Dr. Pierce were blocking her view. "Why isn't she crying anymore?" Danielle demanded. "What's wrong?" "She's fine," Dr. Pierce called back, but he didn't turn around, didn't look at Danielle, didn't do anything to reassure her beyond that brief, inadequate statement. The door opened again and Danielle's head whipped around, hoping desperately that it would be Marcus. But it was just another nurse, someone Danielle hadn't seen before, carrying some kind of medical equipment. "Heart rate stabilizing," Karen said from across the room. 95, 100, 110. Danielle's own heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Her baby's heart rate had been unstable. That was serious. That could mean all kinds of problems. Why hadn't anyone explained this to her properly? Why had Karen dismissed her concerns when clearly something had been wrong? Dr. Pierce finally turned around, and he was carrying Danielle's daughter, wrapped in a white blanket with a tiny pink cap on her head. He approached the bed and without any ceremony or warmth, placed the baby in Danielle's arms. "She's fine now," he said. "Had a little trouble with the transition, but she's breathing well on her own. We'll monitor her closely for the next few hours." Danielle looked down at her daughter's face and felt her heart completely melt. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Her eyes were closed, her little mouth was pursed, and her chest was rising and falling with steady breaths. "Hi, baby girl," Danielle whispered, tears flowing freely now. "Hi. I'm your mama. I'm so glad you're here." Her daughter didn't open her eyes, but one tiny hand escaped from the blanket, fingers curled into a miniature fist. Danielle touched it gently, marveling at how small it was, how delicate, how impossibly precious. "She weighs 6 pounds, 4 ounces, Emily said, writing something on a chart. 19 inches long. Apgar scores were 7 at 1 minute, 9 at 5 minutes. Danielle knew enough from her research to understand that those scores meant her baby was healthy despite the complications. 7 was acceptable, 9 was excellent. Her daughter was going to be okay. But as Danielle held her baby and tried to process everything that had just happened, anger began to simmer beneath her relief. If she'd been right about something being wrong, if her baby had indeed experienced distress that the nurses had initially dismissed, then what might have happened if she hadn't insisted on being checked? What if she'd accepted their assessment that she was being dramatic, that nothing was wrong, that she needed to calm down and stop bothering them? The door opened one more time, and finally, it was Marcus. He rushed into the room, his face a mixture of concern and relief, his eyes immediately finding Danielle and the baby. "I'm so sorry," he said, moving quickly to her side. "The call took longer than I expected. I got here as fast as I could." He looked down at the baby in Danielle's arms, and his expression softened completely. "Oh my God. She's here. She's really here. We have a daughter," Danielle said, her voice thick with emotion. "Marcus, we have a daughter." He leaned down and kissed Danielle's forehead, then looked at their baby with wonder in his eyes. "She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect. Are you both okay?" Danielle hesitated, aware that Karen and Emily were still in the room, still within earshot. "There were some complications," she said carefully. "But we're both fine now." She saw Marcus's expression change, saw the way his eyes sharpened, saw him shift from overwhelmed new father to something else, something more alert and analytical. He looked at the monitors, at the medical staff, at the equipment scattered around the room. "What kind of complications?" he asked quietly. "Her heart rate dropped during delivery," Dr. Pierce said, stepping forward. "Not uncommon for first births. She recovered quickly, and as you can see, she's doing well now." "When did it drop?" Marcus asked. "During the actual delivery or before?" There was something in the way he asked the question that made Danielle look at him more closely. His voice was calm, almost casual, but there was an undertone to it, a precision that reminded her of the way he spoke when he was working, when he was dealing with something professional rather than personal. "Does it matter?" Karen interjected, her voice sharp. "Your baby is fine. Your wife is fine. That's what matters." Marcus turned to look at her, and Danielle saw Karen's expression falter slightly under his gaze. "I'd like to know the timeline," Marcus said, still calm, still polite, but with that steel underneath. "When did the heart rate issues start, and when did medical staff become aware of them?" "I don't have the exact times," Karen said defensively. "Things move quickly during delivery. We don't always note every single detail. But there is a record," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "The monitors log everything automatically." Karen's face flushed slightly. "Yes, but..." "Then I'd like to see those records, please," Marcus said, "along with the complete chart documenting my wife's labor and delivery." "That's not something we can just hand over," Dr. Pierce said, his voice taking on an edge. "Medical records require a formal request process. You can speak to medical records on your way out." "I'll do that," Marcus said. "But I'd also like to know who was responsible for monitoring my wife during labor. Were you the primary nurse?" He directed this question at Karen. "I was one of them," Karen said, crossing her arms defensively. "Is there a problem? I'm just trying to understand what happened," Marcus said. "My wife called me about an hour ago, very concerned that something felt wrong. She said she'd tried to get someone to check on the baby, but her concerns were dismissed." The room went very quiet. Danielle watched the exchange with growing understanding. Marcus wasn't just asking questions as a worried father. He was asking questions as someone who knew exactly what questions to ask, someone who understood how medical systems worked, someone who knew what information mattered. "First-time mothers are often anxious," Dr. Pierce said smoothly. "We're trained to distinguish between normal labor anxiety and actual medical concerns. In this case, everything was handled appropriately." "Was it?" Marcus asked, and now the steel in his voice was unmistakable. "Because my wife says she called for help multiple times. She says she told you something felt wrong. And it turns out she was right. The baby did experience distress. So I'm wondering why her concerns were dismissed instead of investigated immediately." "Now, wait just a minute," Karen said, her face going red. "We did our jobs. Your wife was checked multiple times. We monitored the baby constantly. If you're suggesting we did something wrong..." "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus interrupted calmly. "I'm asking for information about my wife's care. That's my right as her husband and the father of this child." Dr. Pierce stepped forward, clearly trying to diffuse the situation. "I understand you're concerned, but this really isn't the time or place for this discussion. Your wife has just given birth. She needs rest. The baby needs monitoring. Why don't we all take a breath and revisit this conversation tomorrow when everyone's had time to calm down?" Marcus looked at Danielle, and she saw the question in his eyes. She gave a tiny nod, and he turned back to the doctor. "That's fine," Marcus said. "We'll revisit it tomorrow. But I will be requesting a full copy of all medical records, monitor logs, and nursing notes. Today." He pulled out his phone and began typing something. Karen and Dr. Pierce exchanged glances, and Danielle saw something pass between them, something that looked like concern. "Who are you calling?" Karen asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "No one right now," Marcus said without looking up. "I'm just making notes. Times, names, specific statements. I like to document things carefully." The way he said it, the precision of his words, sent a clear message. Danielle felt a surge of gratitude for her husband, for his calm competence, for the way he could take a situation that felt overwhelming and chaotic and bring order to it. But she also felt a growing sense that there was more going on here than she fully understood. Marcus had always been meticulous, had always liked to have documentation and records. But this felt different. This felt like someone who knew exactly how to navigate a system, who knew exactly what questions would make medical professionals uncomfortable, who knew exactly what rights he had and how to exercise them. "I think we're done here," Dr. Pierce said abruptly. "We need to move you to a recovery room. A nurse will be in shortly to help with that transfer." He left quickly, Karen and Emily following him out. As soon as the door closed, Danielle looked at Marcus. "What was that?" she asked quietly. Marcus set his phone down and took her hand carefully, mindful of the IV still in her arm. "Tell me everything that happened while I was gone. Every detail you remember." So Danielle told him. About the way Karen had dismissed her concerns. About pressing the call button and being ignored. About the nurses laughing at their station. About having to fight to be checked, to be heard, to be taken seriously. About the fear she'd felt when she knew something was wrong, but couldn't get anyone to listen. As she spoke, she watched Marcus's expression grow darker. Not angry exactly, but something harder, something colder. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I should have been here. Your work call could have waited," he said firmly. "Nothing is more important than you and our baby. Nothing. I should have stayed. You're here now," Danielle said. "And everything turned out okay. Look at her, Marcus. We have a daughter." They both looked down at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully now, unaware of all the drama surrounding her birth. Marcus reached out and gently touched their daughter's cheek, his hand so large compared to her tiny face. "She's amazing," he whispered. "She's the most amazing thing I've ever seen." Danielle felt tears prick her eyes again. "I know. I can't stop looking at her. What should we name her?" Marcus asked. "We never quite decided between the options." They'd narrowed it down to 3 names, unable to make a final choice. But now, looking at their daughter's face, Danielle knew. "Maya," she said. "Her name is Maya. It means water and illusion, but it also represents strength. I want her to be strong. Stronger than I was today." "You were incredibly strong today," Marcus said firmly. "You stood up for yourself and our baby even when it was hard. Even when people tried to make you feel like you were wrong for speaking up. That's exactly the kind of strength I want Maya to learn from you." A nurse Danielle hadn't seen before came in to help move her to a recovery room. This nurse, an older black woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, was everything Karen and Emily hadn't been. She introduced herself as Sharon, asked Danielle how she was feeling, and explained every step of what she was doing. "Your baby is beautiful," Sharon said warmly, helping Danielle into a wheelchair while Marcus carefully held Maya. "First baby, yes," Danielle said. It was complicated. Something in Sharon's expression changed. "I heard there were some issues during delivery. I'm sorry you had a difficult experience." The way she said it, with genuine sympathy and without any hint of judgment, made Danielle's throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she managed to say. As Sharon wheeled her through the hospital corridors toward the recovery wing, Danielle noticed the way Marcus was walking beside them, one hand on the wheelchair, the other supporting baby Maya, but his eyes were constantly moving, taking in details, reading signs, noting room numbers and staff names. He was planning something. She knew her husband well enough to recognize when his mind was working through a problem, analyzing variables, considering options. But what exactly he was planning, she couldn't quite determine. The recovery room was smaller than the delivery room, but cleaner, quieter, more peaceful. Sharon helped Danielle into the bed, showed Marcus how to adjust the various controls, and explained that someone would be in shortly to help with feeding if Danielle wanted to try nursing. "Dr. Pierce wants to monitor Maya for a few hours because of the heart rate drop," Sharon explained gently. "But barring any issues, she can stay in the room with you. There's a bassinet right here where she can sleep." "Is that normal?" Danielle asked. "Monitoring her, I mean. Is she in danger?" "It's precautionary," Sharon assured her. The heart rate drop was concerning, but she recovered well, and her APGAR scores were good. "Dr. Pierce just wants to make sure she stays stable. It's the right thing to do." Unlike Karen, when Sharon said it was just a precaution, Danielle actually believed her. There was competence in her manner, but also compassion, a recognition that new parents were scared and needed honest information, not dismissal. After Sharon left, Marcus placed Maya in the bassinet and pulled a chair close to Danielle's bed. He took her hand again. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Something I should have mentioned before, but I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think we'd end up in a situation where it would become relevant." Danielle looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Marcus took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "My job. The position I took 6 months ago. I told you I was taking a role in healthcare compliance." "Right," Danielle said. "You said you'd be doing audits or something, making sure medical facilities follow regulations." "That's part of it," Marcus said. "But it's more than that. I'm a senior state healthcare compliance investigator. I oversee licensing for hospitals and medical facilities throughout the state. When there are complaints about patient care, violations of medical standards, or concerns about safety, my office investigates. And if we find serious violations, we have the authority to impose fines, require corrective action, or in extreme cases, shut facilities down pending remediation." Danielle stared at her husband, trying to process what he was saying. "You can shut down hospitals. It's not something we do lightly," Marcus said. "It's a last resort for serious, repeated violations. But yes, my office has that authority. I've been part of 3 hospital shutdowns in my career. All of them deserved it. Why didn't you tell me this before?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Because I didn't want it to color how you saw medical care. I didn't want you to be constantly suspicious or worried every time we went to a doctor's appointment. I wanted you to be able to trust your medical providers without my work baggage getting in the way. But you knew there might be problems," Danielle said, understanding dawning. "That's why you wanted me to document everything. That's why you asked me to keep track of all my appointments and interactions." "I've seen patterns," Marcus admitted. "I know what warning signs look like, and I wanted to make sure that if anything went wrong, we had documentation. But Danielle, I honestly hoped it wouldn't be necessary. I researched this hospital thoroughly before we chose it. Their ratings are good. They have a solid reputation. I thought we'd be fine. But we weren't fine," Danielle said quietly. "No," Marcus agreed. "We weren't. And the way you were treated today, the way your concerns were dismissed, the way those nurses behaved, that's not just poor bedside manner. That's a pattern of behavior that puts patients at risk." Danielle looked over at Maya, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, and felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it took her breath away. Her daughter had been at risk today. The heart rate drop that Karen had initially dismissed could have been serious.
If Danielle hadn't insisted on being checked, if she hadn't fought to be heard, what might have happened? "What are you going to do?" she asked Marcus. "What I'm trained to do," he said simply. "Document everything. Request all medical records. Interview everyone involved. And then file a formal complaint with my office. Someone else will handle the investigation to avoid conflict of interest, but I'll make sure it gets the attention it deserves." Will those nurses get in trouble? If they violated protocols or standards of care, yes. They should get in trouble. What happened to you shouldn't happen to anyone. You trusted these people to help you safely deliver our daughter, and they treated you like an inconvenience at best, with active contempt at worst. Danielle was quiet for a moment, thinking about Karen's dismissive tone, Emily's barely concealed smirks, the way they'd made her feel like she was overreacting when her instincts had been right all along. "I should have said something," she said. "Should have demanded better treatment." "You did say something," Marcus corrected gently. "Multiple times. You advocated for yourself and Maya constantly. The problem isn't that you didn't speak up loudly enough. The problem is that they refused to listen. That's on them, not you." A soft knock on the door interrupted them, and Sharon entered again, this time carrying some papers. "Just need you to sign a few discharge forms," she said. "And I wanted to let you know that Dr. Pierce has ordered a full workup on Maya, including blood work and continuous heart monitoring for the next 6 hours. If everything looks good, you should be able to take her home tomorrow afternoon." "Thank you," Danielle said. "Sharon, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey. Have you worked here long?" 15 years, Sharon said. "Started as a nursing assistant, worked my way up. Do you know the nurses who were with me during delivery? Karen Whitfield and Emily Ross." Sharon's expression became carefully neutral, which told Danielle everything she needed to know. "I know who they are," Sharon said carefully. "Have there been complaints about them before?" Marcus asked directly. Sharon looked at him, then at Danielle, clearly torn between professional loyalty and honesty. "I'm not supposed to discuss other staff members with patients," she said finally. "But I will say that some nurses are better suited to certain types of care than others. And I'm very glad I'm the one taking care of you now." It was a diplomatic answer, but the meaning was clear. There had been issues before. Karen and Emily had a reputation. If someone wanted to file a formal complaint about their care, Marcus said, "What would be the process?" "There's a patient advocate office on the second floor," Sharon said. "They handle complaints and concerns. You can also speak directly to the hospital administrator, Linda Matthews. Her office is on the 3rd floor." "Thank you," Marcus said. "That's very helpful." After Sharon left, Danielle felt exhaustion washing over her. It had been nearly 30 hours since her labor started, and the adrenaline that had kept her going was finally wearing off. She was tired, sore, and emotionally drained. "Sleep," Marcus said, seeing her eyes droop. "I'll watch Maya. I'll watch both of you. Nothing's going to happen while I'm here." Danielle wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake and keep watching her daughter, but her body had other ideas. Within minutes, she was asleep. She woke several hours later to the sound of low voices. The room was darker now, evening light filtering through the blinds. Marcus was standing near the door, talking to someone, and as Danielle's eyes adjusted, she realized it was Dr. Pierce. "The monitoring shows everything is stable," Dr. Pierce was saying. "Heart rate has been consistent for 6 hours. Blood work all came back normal. I see no reason why you can't take the baby home tomorrow as planned." "Good," Marcus said. "I'm glad to hear it. While I have you here, doctor, I'd like to discuss the timeline of events during my wife's delivery. I'm trying to understand exactly when the heart rate issues began and when they were first addressed." Dr. Pierce's posture stiffened. "As I said earlier, this isn't the appropriate time." "When would be an appropriate time?" Marcus asked calmly. "Because I've requested the medical records, and I'm told it will take 3 to 5 business days to process that request. But as the father of the patient who experienced distress, I believe I have the right to immediate information about what happened to my daughter." "The baby is fine," Dr. Pierce said, his voice taking on an edge. I don't understand why you're pursuing this. Because my wife was dismissed and ignored when she raised legitimate concerns about our baby's well-being. Because if she hadn't insisted on being examined, those heart rate issues might not have been caught in time. Because I want to understand if proper protocols were followed. Dr. Pierce looked at Marcus for a long moment. Are you a lawyer? No, Marcus said. But I work in healthcare oversight. I'm familiar with standards of care and reporting requirements. And I know that when a patient repeatedly expresses concern about fetal distress, and those concerns are dismissed as anxiety rather than investigated properly, that represents a serious lapse in professional judgment. The color drained slightly from Dr. Pierce's face. I think you're overreacting. First-time parents often. Please don't tell me this is normal first-time parent anxiety. Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm, but with an undercurrent of steel. My wife is an intelligent, educated woman who attended every prenatal appointment, every birthing class, every preparation session. She knows the difference between normal labor discomfort and something being wrong. And when she told your nursing staff that something felt wrong, she was right. The baby's heart rate had dropped. That's documented in your own monitoring logs. We addressed it as soon as we were aware, Dr. Pierce said defensively. But when did you become aware? That's what I'm trying to understand. Because according to my wife, she was raising concerns for over an hour before anyone took them seriously. Danielle decided to make her presence known. I'm awake, she said quietly. Both men turned to look at her. Marcus immediately came to her side, while Dr. Pierce maintained his position near the door. How are you feeling? Dr. Pierce asked, shifting back into professional mode. Tired, Danielle said honestly. And worried about my daughter. Your daughter is doing very well, Dr. Pierce assured her. All her tests have come back normal. You should be able to go home tomorrow. That's good news, Danielle said. She looked at the bassinet where Maya was sleeping. Can I hold her? Of course, Dr. Pierce said. She's your baby. Marcus carefully lifted Maya from the bassinet and placed her in Danielle's arms. The baby stirred slightly, but didn't wake, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. Danielle felt that fierce protective love surge through her again, stronger than before. Dr. Pierce, she said, looking up at him. I want to know what happened. Not the glossed-over version. I want to know when Maya's heart rate dropped, when the nurses became aware of it, and why my concerns were dismissed before that. The doctor looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Brooks, I understand you had a frightening experience. Childbirth can be traumatic, especially when there are complications. But I want to assure you that your baby received appropriate medical care throughout your delivery. That's not what I asked, Danielle said. I asked you to tell me what happened. Marcus is right. I was raising concerns for a long time before anyone took them seriously. I was told I was being dramatic. I was told I needed to calm down. I was told that stress wasn't good for the baby, as if my concern for my child's well-being was somehow the problem rather than the solution. Nurses sometimes use calming language to help patients manage anxiety, Dr. Pierce said carefully. There's a difference between calming language and dismissal, Marcus interjected. Between reassurance and refusing to investigate legitimate concerns. Dr. Pierce looked between them, clearly recognizing that this wasn't going to go away with platitudes and professional deflection. I'll pull the complete record, he said finally. You'll have it by tomorrow morning. It will show the exact timeline of all monitoring, all interventions, and all nursing notes. You can review it and draw your own conclusions. Thank you, Marcus said. We appreciate that. After Dr. Pierce left, Danielle looked at Marcus. He's scared. He should be, Marcus said. If protocols weren't followed, if your concerns were documented but ignored, that's serious. That's potentially a patient safety violation. What happens if it was a violation depends on the severity and whether there's a pattern. Could be anything from mandatory retraining to suspension to termination. And if the hospital knew about issues with those nurses and didn't address them, the facility itself could face consequences. Danielle looked down at Maya,
studying her perfect tiny features. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly. "I'm not interested in ruining anyone's life. But Marcus, what if this happens to someone else? What if the next time the baby doesn't recover so quickly? What if the next mother doesn't insist on being heard?" "That's exactly why this matters," Marcus said. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about making sure that what happened to you doesn't happen to the next patient who walks through those doors." They sat in silence for a while, Danielle holding Maya, Marcus holding Danielle's hand. The hospital sounds filtered in from the hallway. Beeping monitors, quiet conversations, the squeak of carts being pushed past their door. "I keep thinking about something," Danielle said eventually. "The way Karen and Emily treated me. The dismissiveness. The eye rolls. The way they laughed when they thought I couldn't hear. Do you think it was because I'm black?" Marcus's hand tightened on hers. "I think it's possible. I think implicit bias is real, and I think it affects medical care in ways that are documented and dangerous. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. And that statistic isn't because black women are inherently more fragile. It's because our concerns are taken less seriously. Our pain is underestimated. Our experiences are dismissed. I wanted to believe it wouldn't happen to me," Danielle said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I have insurance. I have education. I did everything right. I thought that would protect me." "It should protect you," Marcus said fiercely. "The fact that it doesn't is the whole problem. And that's why we're not going to let this go. Not because we want to punish anyone, but because we want to change things. Because Maya deserves to grow up in a world where her mother's life and health are valued, where any concerns she might have about her own medical care someday are taken seriously." Danielle nodded, wiping her tears. "You're right. We can't let this go." A soft knock on the door announced Sharon's return. She was carrying a tray with what looked like dinner. "I thought you might be hungry," she said kindly. "Hospital food isn't gourmet, but it's better than nothing." "Thank you," Danielle said gratefully. She realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast, which felt like a lifetime ago. Sharon helped her adjust the bed so she could eat while still holding Maya. As she did, she spoke quietly. "I heard Dr. Pierce stopped by," she said. "I also heard you requested your full medical records. News travels fast," Marcus observed. "Hospitals are like small towns," Sharon said with a slight smile. "Everyone talks. And between you and me, people are talking about you." "What are they saying?" Danielle asked. Sharon hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Some of the staff are worried. Karen went home early, claiming she was sick. Emily's been very quiet. Dr. Pierce has been in meetings with hospital administration, and the nursing supervisor has been reviewing protocols and documentation." "Why are you telling us this?" Marcus asked. Sharon looked at them directly. "Because I've been a nurse for a long time. Long enough to see what happens when good people stay quiet about bad practices. Long enough to know that sometimes the only way things change is when someone has the courage to speak up. And from what I've heard about what happened during your delivery, someone needed to speak up a long time ago. Have there been other complaints?" Danielle asked. "I can't discuss specific cases," Sharon said. "But I can tell you that when I heard Karen and Emily were assigned to your delivery, I was concerned. And I'm not the only one who would have been." "Why were they assigned if people had concerns?" Marcus asked. "Because concerns without formal complaints don't go anywhere," Sharon said bluntly. "People whisper. People worry. But unless someone files official documentation, unless someone goes on record, nothing changes. The nurses with the best political relationships get the best shifts and the most leeway. And some nurses are very good at being charming to management while treating patients poorly." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I shouldn't say any of this, but I saw you in that delivery room afterward. I saw your face. And I thought about all the other women who felt that same fear, that same helplessness, and who didn't have anyone to speak up for them. So if you're planning to file a complaint, good. Someone should." After Sharon left, Danielle and Marcus ate in thoughtful silence. The The food was indeed mediocre, but Danielle was hungry enough that it tasted fine. Maya woke briefly, making little mewing sounds, and Danielle attempted nursing for the first time with Sharon's patient guidance when the nurse returned to check on them. It was awkward and difficult, but eventually Maya latched on, and Danielle felt a rush of emotion at this new connection with her daughter. This was what those first hours after birth were supposed to feel like. Peaceful, bonding, supported by caring medical professionals who wanted to help new parents navigate this overwhelming experience. Instead, her first hours as a mother had been marked by fear, dismissal, and the terrible knowledge that her baby had been at risk because professionals had refused to take her concerns seriously. As night fell and the hospital quieted, Marcus pulled his chair close to the bed and opened his laptop. "What are you doing?" Danielle asked quietly, not wanting to disturb Maya, who had fallen asleep nursing and was now cradled in the crook of Danielle's arm. "Making notes," Marcus said. "Everything you remember, everything I witnessed, every name and time and specific statement. I want it documented while it's fresh." Danielle walked him through the entire experience again, this time in even more detail. What time each interaction had occurred, the exact words Karen had used, the way Emily had laughed, the feeling of pressing the call button repeatedly with no response, the fear that had built as contractions intensified, the moment when she'd known, absolutely known, that something was wrong, and the way that knowledge had been dismissed. Marcus typed steadily, asking clarifying questions, making sure he had every detail captured accurately. When they finished, it was after midnight, and Danielle's eyes were heavy again. "Sleep," Marcus said, closing his laptop. "I'll watch Maya. I'll watch both of you. You need to sleep too." Danielle protested weakly. "I'll sleep when I'm sure you're both safe," Marcus said firmly. Danielle didn't have the energy to argue. She drifted off with her hand touching Maya's bassinet, needing that physical connection to her daughter even in sleep. She woke the next morning to sunshine streaming through the window and the sound of voices in the hallway. Marcus was still awake, sitting in his chair with his laptop open, though he looked exhausted. "Did you sleep at all?" Danielle asked. "A little," he said, which she suspected meant not at all. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Danielle admitted, "but better than yesterday." A nurse came in. Not Sharon this time, but another woman Danielle didn't recognize, to check her vitals and Maya's. Everything looked good. The baby was healthy, Danielle's recovery was progressing normally, and if Dr. Pierce approved, they could go home that afternoon. "Is Sharon working today?" Danielle asked. "She's on the night shift," the nurse said, "but she left a note for you." She handed Danielle a folded piece of paper. Danielle opened it after the nurse left. Sharon's handwriting was neat and precise. "You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Take care of that beautiful baby. And if you need anything, ask for me." It was a simple note, but it made Danielle's throat tight. Sharon had seen her at her most vulnerable, had witnessed the aftermath of her traumatic delivery, and instead of being just another anonymous medical professional, she'd taken the time to offer real support. Dr. Pierce arrived mid-morning with what looked like a thick folder of papers. "Your medical records," he announced, setting them on the rolling table beside Danielle's bed. "Complete monitoring logs, nursing notes, doctor's notes, everything documented during your stay." Marcus immediately reached for them, but Dr. Pierce held up a hand. "Before you dive into those, I'd like to discuss something with both of you." "What's that?" Marcus asked, his tone wary. "I spoke with hospital administration this morning. We take patient concerns very seriously, and we want to address what happened during your delivery. We'd like to offer you a meeting with Linda Matthews, our hospital administrator, to discuss your experience and how we can improve." "That's a start," Marcus said. "When can we schedule that?" "She's available this afternoon if you'd like to meet before you're discharged." Danielle and Marcus exchanged glances. "We'd like to review these records first," Marcus said. "And then, we'll meet with Miss Matthews." Dr. Pierce looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. I'll let her know you'll need a few hours. She'll come by this afternoon. After he left, Marcus spread the records out on the table, and together he and Danielle began reading through them. It was slow going. The medical terminology was dense, and the handwriting in some of the nurses' notes was barely legible. But certain facts emerged clearly. Danielle's first complaint about feeling like something was wrong had been documented at 9:42 a.m. Karen's note read, patient expressing anxiety about fetal movement. Explained normal labor variations. Advised relaxation. At 10:15 a.m., Danielle had pressed the call button. The log showed it had been acknowledged, but that no one had entered the room for 12 minutes. At 10:47 a.m., she'd pressed it again. Karen's note, patient requesting examination. Checked cervix, 7 centimeters dilated. Patient continues to express anxiety. Counseled on managing labor stress. But nowhere in the notes from that time period was there any mention of checking the fetal heart rate, even though that had been Danielle's primary concern. The first documentation of heart rate issues appeared at 11:33 a.m. Fetal heart rate dropped to 90 bpm. Drive Pierce notified immediately. Heart rate recovered to 120 bpm within 45 seconds. Danielle looked at the timeline, feeling sick. She'd been raising concerns since 9:42. The heart rate drop was documented at 11:33. That was nearly 2 hours of her concerns being dismissed as anxiety. How long had the heart rate actually been dropping? She asked Marcus. If they only documented it when it got severe enough that they couldn't ignore it, how many times had it dipped before that? We can't know from these records, Marcus said grimly. But the continuous monitoring logs might show more. Those are usually maintained electronically, and they capture every heartbeat. If the hospital uses that system, and most do now, we should be able to request those logs separately. He was making more notes on his laptop, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Danielle watched him work, seeing the professional side of her husband that she rarely witnessed. This was what he did, she realized. He took complicated medical situations and broke them down into facts, patterns, documentation. He found the gaps in care, the places where protocols failed, the moments when patients were put at risk. And now he was doing it for his own family. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. It was Emily, the nurse from the day before, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. I heard you wanted to speak with administration, she said quietly. I wanted to apologize. For yesterday. I should have listened to you better. Danielle looked at the young nurse, seeing genuine distress in her face. She was young, probably mid-20s, and she looked like she'd been crying. Why didn't you listen? Danielle asked. Not angry, just genuinely wanting to understand. Emily glanced at the door as if worried about being overheard. Karen's been a nurse here for 15 years. She's friends with the nursing supervisor. She has a reputation for knowing what she's doing. When she said you were just anxious, I believed her. I should have trusted my own judgment, but I'm still relatively new, and I deferred to her experience. Even when you saw me in distress. Danielle pressed. I told myself that labor is always distressing, Emily said, tears starting to slide down her cheeks. I told myself that Karen would know better than me if something was really wrong. I was wrong to do that. I was wrong to let her dismiss your concerns. And I'm sorry. Marcus had been watching this exchange quietly. Now he spoke. Are you aware of other patients who've had similar experiences with Karen? Emily hesitated, then nodded. There's been talk. Nothing official, just talk among the younger nurses. About how Karen can be dismissive sometimes. About how she doesn't take certain patients as seriously as others. What do you mean by certain patients? Marcus asked. Emily looked miserable. I don't want to accuse anyone of racism, but I've noticed that she seems to have less patience with black patients, with any patients of color, really. She doesn't say anything explicitly, but there's a tone, a dismissiveness. I've noticed it, but I didn't know what to do about it. You could have filed a complaint, Marcus said. I know. Emily said, wiping her eyes. But I'm still probationary. I'm not even a full permanent employee yet. If I'd filed a complaint against a senior nurse, one who has connections to administration, I could have lost my job. And I have student loans. I have bills. I couldn't risk it. Danielle felt a complicated mix of emotions. She understood Emily's position, understood the vulnerability of being young and new and worried about job security. But she also knew that silence enabled harm. Emily's fear of speaking up had contributed to Danielle's suffering. I understand why you were scared, Danielle said carefully. But my baby was in danger, and your silence helped create the conditions where that danger could exist. I know, Emily whispered. I know, and I'll have to live with that. I'm going to file a report about what happened. I'm going to tell the truth about what I saw and heard, even if it costs me my job. That takes courage, Marcus said. And it's the right thing to do. After Emily left, Danielle looked at Marcus. Do you believe her? I believe she's scared, Marcus said. I believe she's young and was intimidated by a more senior nurse. And I believe that the system creates conditions where people like Emily are afraid to speak up, which allows people like Karen to keep behaving badly. It's not just one bad nurse, Danielle said, understanding. It's the whole system that lets her get away with it. Exactly, Marcus said. That's what we need to address. Not just Karen's behavior, but the environment that enabled it. Linda Matthews arrived at 2 o'clock. She was a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled gray hair and an expensive suit, and she carried herself with the careful professionalism of someone accustomed to managing crises. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, she said, extending her hand. I'm Linda Matthews, the hospital administrator. I understand you had a concerning experience during your delivery, and I want to address that. Thank you for meeting with us, Marcus said, shaking her hand but maintaining a cool professional distance. They sat in the chairs near the window. Matthews had brought an additional chair from somewhere. With Maya sleeping peacefully in her bassinet nearby, unaware of the serious conversation happening around her. I've reviewed the preliminary reports, Matthews began, and I want to apologize for any shortcomings in your care. We pride ourselves on providing excellent patient experiences, and it's clear that we fell short of that standard in your case. With all due respect, Marcus said, I'm less interested in apologies than I am in understanding what systemic failures allowed this to happen and what will be done to prevent it from happening again. Matthews's perfectly professional expression didn't change, but Danielle saw her eyes sharpen. What specifically are you concerned about? Marcus opened his laptop. My wife first expressed concern about fetal distress at 9:42 a.m. That concern was documented but dismissed as normal labor anxiety. She continued to express concern repeatedly over the next nearly 2 hours. During that time, according to the nursing notes, her concerns were characterized as stress, anxiety, and overreaction. When fetal heart rate issues were finally documented at 11:33 a.m., they were severe enough to require immediate intervention. My question is, how many times did the heart rate drop before it got severe enough that the nurses couldn't ignore it anymore?
The continuous monitoring logs show several minor decelerations starting around 10:15 a.m. So my wife was right, Danielle said. Something was wrong, and I knew it. The decelerations were within normal parameters initially, Matthew said carefully. They only became concerning when they increased in duration and severity. But they were happening, Marcus pressed. And my wife sensed that something was wrong. Instead of investigating her concerns thoroughly, your staff dismissed them. If she hadn't continued to insist on being examined, how long would it have taken before someone noticed the pattern? Matthews was quiet for a moment. I can't answer that hypothetically. Then let me ask you directly. Marcus said, are you aware of any previous complaints about the nurses who attended my wife's delivery? Matthews's carefully neutral expression flickered. I'm not at liberty to discuss personnel matters. That's not what I asked, Marcus said. I asked if you're aware of complaints. Not what action was or wasn't taken on those complaints, just whether they exist. There have been some concerns raised, Matthews admitted reluctantly. but nothing that rose to the level of formal disciplinary action. Why not? Danielle asked. If people raised concerns, if there were complaints, why wasn't anything done? Healthcare is a high-stress environment, Matthews said. Interpersonal conflicts are common. We try to address issues through coaching and education rather than jumping straight to discipline. There's a difference between interpersonal conflict and patient safety violations, Marcus said. My wife's concerns were medically valid. The fetal monitoring logs prove that. So when her concerns were dismissed, that wasn't an interpersonal conflict. That was a failure to provide appropriate medical care. Matthews set down her tablet. What is it that you want, Mr. Brooks? I want to know that this won't happen to the next patient, Marcus said. I want to know that when the next black woman walks into this hospital and expresses concern about her pregnancy, she'll be taken seriously. I want to know that implicit bias training is mandatory and enforced. I want to know that there are systems in place to catch patterns of dismissive behavior before they result in patient harm. We have bias training, Matthews said. All staff are required to complete it annually, and yet it didn't prevent what happened to my wife, Marcus countered. So either the training is inadequate, or it's not being enforced, or the consequences for violating its principles are insufficient to change behavior. Possibly all three. Matthews looked at him for a long moment. You seem very familiar with healthcare oversight. I am, Marcus said simply. I'm a senior state healthcare compliance investigator. The color drained from Matthews's face. I see. I want to be clear about something. Marcus continued. I'm here right now as a patient's husband and a father. What happened to my family is personal. But what I learned yesterday is that this is a pattern, that other patients have likely experienced similar treatment, that complaints have been raised and not adequately addressed. So while I'm here personally right now, I will be filing a formal complaint with my office. Someone else will conduct the investigation to avoid conflict of interest, but I will ensure that it receives proper attention. Matthews's professional composure was cracking. Mr. Brooks, I hope we can resolve this informally. A state investigation would be disruptive and necessary, Marcus finished. Because informal resolutions of previous concerns clearly didn't prevent what happened to my wife. We're willing to offer compensation, Matthews said. We can cover all medical costs, provide additional follow-up care, offer a settlement. This isn't about money. Danielle interrupted. This is about making sure it doesn't happen to someone else. To some other mother who might not have a husband who knows how to navigate the system. To some other baby who might not recover as quickly as Maya did. You're talking about potentially destroying careers, Matthews said. Karen Whitfield has been a nurse here for 15 years. Emily Ross is just starting out. If you file this complaint, if they violated standards of care, their careers should face consequences, Marcus said firmly. That's how accountability works. That's how patients stay safe. Matthews stood up abruptly. I need to consult with our legal team before we continue this conversation. That's fine, Marcus said. We'll be here for another few hours before discharge. But Miss Matthews, I want to be very clear. My formal complaint will be filed by the end of business today, regardless of what your legal team advises. The only question is whether this hospital cooperates voluntarily or whether we need to compel cooperation through official channels. After Matthews left, practically fleeing from the room, Danielle let out a long breath. That was intense. It needed to be, Marcus said. She was trying to minimize and contain this. Make it go away quietly with money and apologies. But that doesn't fix the systemic problems. What happens now? Now, we wait to see how they respond, Marcus said. But either way, I'm filing the formal complaint. I've already started the paperwork. A few hours later, as Danielle was getting dressed to go home and Marcus was packing up their things, there was another knock on the door. This time it was Dr. Pierce again, and he looked grim. I wanted to let you know that Karen Whitfield has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, he said without preamble. Emily Ross will be undergoing additional training and supervision. And the hospital
hospital will be implementing enhanced protocols for addressing patient concerns during labor and delivery. That's a start, Marcus said neutrally. I also wanted to apologize personally, Dr. Pierce continued. I should have recognized that your wife's concerns warranted more thorough investigation. I should have reviewed the monitoring logs more carefully when I first arrived. I prioritized getting the baby delivered over understanding what had led to that moment of crisis. Thank you for saying that, Danielle said. It meant something hearing an actual apology from the doctor. I've been practicing obstetrics for 25 years, Dr. Pierce said. I like to think I provide good care. But this situation has made me realize that I need to be more attentive to how my nursing staff treats patients, particularly patients of color. Research shows significant disparities in maternal outcomes, and I should have been more aware of how those disparities might play out in my own practice. I appreciate you recognizing that, Danielle said. After Dr. Pierce left, Sharon appeared one more time, even though she wasn't on shift. She'd come in specifically to say goodbye. I heard about what happened with administration, she said, giving Danielle a warm hug. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for not letting this slide. I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't happen again, Danielle said. It will help, Sharon assured her. Change happens slowly in hospitals, but it happens. And every time someone like you stands up and says this isn't acceptable, it moves us a little closer to better care for everyone. She looked down at Maya, who was awake now and looking around with unfocused newborn eyes. She's beautiful. She's going to grow up knowing her mother is strong enough to fight for what's right. That's a powerful gift. The drive home was quiet. Marcus drove carefully, hyper-aware of the precious cargo in the back seat. Maya was secured in her car seat, and Danielle kept turning around to check on her, unable to stop herself from constantly verifying that her daughter was okay. When they pulled into their driveway, the house looked exactly the same as when they'd left 36 hours earlier, but everything felt different. They were parents now. They had a daughter, and they'd learned hard truths about how systems could fail, about how bias could creep into supposedly neutral medical care, about how much it mattered to speak up, even when speaking up was hard. Inside, Marcus carefully carried Maya in her car seat and set it down on the living room floor. They both knelt beside it, just looking at their daughter. We did it, Danielle said softly. We brought her home, you did it, Marcus corrected. You brought her into the world. You kept both of you safe despite everything working against you. You're incredible. Danielle felt tears start to fall again, but these were different tears. Not fear or frustration or anger, but overwhelming love and relief and gratitude that they'd all made it through. The next few days passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and exhausted naps whenever Maya slept. Marcus had taken 2 weeks of paternity leave, and he spent every moment either caring for Maya or working on the formal complaint he was filing. On the 4th day home, he got a call from his office. He took it in the other room, but Danielle could hear the low murmur of his voice, could hear the serious tone. When he came back, his expression was grim. That was my supervisor, he said. The complaint has been assigned to another investigator. Sarah Chen, she's excellent, and she's already started preliminary work. And she found something. The hospital's internal complaint system shows 8 separate concerns raised about Karen Whitfield over the past 5 years. All of them involved dismissive treatment of patients of color. None of them were investigated thoroughly. Most were marked as resolved through counseling. Danielle felt sick. 8 people complained and nothing was done. Nothing meaningful, Marcus said. A couple of mandatory training sessions, a written warning in her file that apparently didn't affect her employment status. The hospital kept giving her chances, and she kept treating patients poorly. So what happens now? Now Sarah conducts a full investigation. She'll interview staff, review all the previous complaints, examine protocols and training records. She'll look at whether the hospital's complaint system is adequate and whether they failed in their duty to ensure patient safety. It could take a few months, but there will be a full report and recommendations. Will Karen lose her nursing license? That's up to the state nursing board. Marcus said. Sarah's investigation might lead to a board review, especially if she finds evidence of repeated violations of nursing standards. But that's a separate process. Over the following weeks, Maya grew and changed, becoming more alert, starting to focus on faces, giving them her first real smile that was more than just gas. Danielle marveled at every milestone, at how quickly her tiny daughter was developing into a real little person. But in the background, the investigation continued. Sarah Chen reached out to interview them, spending 3 hours going through everything that had happened in meticulous detail. She was professional, thorough, and clearly took the matter seriously. "I want you to know that cases like this matter," Sarah told them as she was leaving. "Every time we can document a pattern, every time we can show that a hospital failed to address known concerns, it makes the system a little bit safer for the next patient. What you're doing isn't just about your experience. It's about preventing harm to others." 2 months after Maya's birth, they received a preliminary report from Sarah's investigation. It was damning. The hospital had failed to adequately address multiple complaints about Karen Whitfield. The implicit bias training was found to be inadequate and not properly enforced. The complaint resolution system was designed in a way that made it difficult for patients to file formal complaints, and informal complaints were routinely dismissed without investigation. The protocols for responding to patient concerns during labor and delivery were vague and left too much room for individual nurse discretion. The report made several recommendations: mandatory enhanced bias training with regular assessments, revision of complaint procedures to make them more accessible and transparent, implementation of clearer protocols for escalating patient concerns, regular audits of nursing staff interactions with patients, and specific disciplinary actions for Karen Whitfield and the nursing supervisor who had failed to address previous complaints. "They're recommending that Karen be terminated," Marcus said, reading through the report, "and that the nursing supervisor be placed on probation with mandatory supervision and retraining." Danielle looked at the report, at the documentation of all the ways the hospital had failed, at the evidence of how many patients had likely suffered because systems designed to protect them had instead protected negligent staff. "Is that enough?" she asked. "It's a start," Marcus said. "The hospital will have to comply with these recommendations or risk sanctions. And the fact that this investigation is on record means that if they fail again, the consequences will be much more severe." 3 months later, they received notice that the hospital had accepted all of Sarah's recommendations and was implementing changes. Karen Whitfield had been terminated. Emily Ross had completed additional training and was being closely supervised, but was allowed to continue working. They also received a letter from Linda Matthews, the hospital administrator. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Brooks," it read, "I want to thank you for bringing these serious concerns to our attention. Your willingness to speak up, even when it was difficult, has resulted in meaningful changes that will improve care for all our patients. We have implemented new training programs, revised our complaint procedures, and established clearer protocols for patient care during labor and delivery. We have also established a patient safety committee that will include community members to provide external oversight. I know that nothing can undo what you experienced, but I hope you can take some comfort in knowing that your courage has made our hospital safer. Sincerely, Linda Matthews." Danielle read the letter twice, trying to sort through her complicated feelings. She was glad that changes had been made. She was relieved that other patients might be spared what she'd experienced. But she was also angry that it had taken a formal state investigation to force the hospital to address problems they should have addressed years ago. "She makes it sound like we did them a favor," Danielle said. "Like we helped them improve rather than forcing them to do what they should have been doing all along." "That's how institutional change works," Marcus said. "Nobody wants to admit they were wrong. They reframe it as improvement and growth and learning. As long as the actual changes happen, I can live with how they describe it." That evening, as Danielle was nursing Maya before bed, she thought about everything that had happened since that terrifying day in the delivery room. She thought about Karen's dismissive tone, Emily's uncomfortable smirks, the fear that had gripped her when she'd known something was wrong and couldn't get anyone to listen. But she also thought about Sharon's kindness, Emily's eventual apology and willingness to speak up, Dr. Pierce's recognition of his own failures, and the systemic changes that had resulted from their complaint. She thought about all the women who had complained before her and not been heard. She thought about all the women who would come after her and who would hopefully have better experiences because someone had finally demanded accountability. "I'm going to tell you a story when you're older," she whispered to Maya, "about the day you were born and about how your dad and I had to fight to make sure you were safe. And I'm going to tell you that story not because I want you to be angry or scared, but because I want you to understand that speaking up matters, that using your voice matters, even when, especially when, it's hard." Maya looked up at her with those wide infant eyes, and Danielle felt that fierce protective love surge through her again. Her daughter would grow up knowing that she was worth fighting for, that her mother's voice deserved to be heard, that systems could be changed when people had the courage to demand better. 6 months after Maya's birth, Danielle returned to teaching. Her students were excited to hear about the new baby, and she showed them pictures on her phone, watching their faces light up at the sight of Maya's smiling face. One of her students, a quiet girl named Jasmine, stayed after class one day. "Miss Brooks," she said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," Danielle said. "My mom says that when she had my little brother, the nurses at the hospital weren't very nice to her. She said they didn't listen when she said something was wrong. She said it's because we're black, and they don't care about us as much." Danielle's heart ached. She thought about how to respond, how to be honest without overwhelming this 9-year-old child with the weight of systemic racism. "Sometimes people have biases they don't even realize," she said carefully. "And sometimes those biases affect how they treat people. It's not okay, and it's not fair, but it happens. What's important is that we don't accept it. Your mom was right to speak up about her experience, even if it was hard." "Did the nurses treat you nice when you had Maya?" Jasmine asked. Danielle thought about lying, about protecting this child from difficult truths. But she'd promised herself that she would be honest, that she would use her experience to help others understand. "No," she said. "They didn't treat me very nicely. But I spoke up about it, and my husband helped me, and we made sure that the hospital had to make changes so that the next moms would be treated better." "Did they get in trouble?" Jasmine asked. "Some of them did," Danielle confirmed. "Because when you're supposed to help people and you don't do your job properly, there should be consequences." "Good," Jasmine said with fierce satisfaction. "My mom should have got them in trouble too." "It's not too late," Danielle said gently. "If your mom wants to file a complaint about her experience, she can. Even if it was a while ago, she can still speak up." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Danielle confirmed. "Would you like me to give your mom some information about how to do that?" A week later, Danielle met with Jasmine's mother, Sandra, and listened to her story. It was painfully familiar. Concerns dismissed, pain minimized, treatment that had been dismissive at best and neglectful at worst. And like Danielle, Sandra had been made to feel like she was overreacting, like her concerns weren't valid. "I thought about complaining," Sandra said, "but I didn't know where to start. And I was so exhausted from having the baby and everything else. It just seemed like too much." "I understand," Danielle said. "But it's not too late. And if you want help navigating the process, I can help you. My husband can help you." Sandra looked at her with something like hope. "Would you really do that?" "I really would," Danielle assured her. "Because what happened to you shouldn't have happened. And the more of us who speak up, the harder it becomes for hospitals to ignore these patterns." Over the next year, Danielle found herself becoming an unexpected advocate. Women in her community started reaching out, sharing their stories, asking for help navigating complaint processes and understanding their rights as patients. Marcus helped when he could, always careful to maintain appropriate boundaries given his professional role, but offering guidance and resources. They started a small support group for women who'd had traumatic birth experiences, meeting monthly in a church community room. Some of the women wanted to file formal complaints. Some just wanted to be heard, to have their experiences validated by others who understood. I thought I was the only one, more than one woman said during those meetings. I thought it was just me. I thought I'd done something wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, Danielle would assure them. The system failed you. That's not your fault. Maya grew and thrived, hitting every milestone, developing into a happy, curious toddler. She was walking now, saying her first words, exploring the world with fearless enthusiasm. And every time Danielle looked at her daughter, she felt grateful, not just that Maya was healthy and safe, but that she was growing up in a world where her mother had learned to use her voice. 2 years after Maya's birth, Danielle and Marcus were invited to speak at a healthcare conference about patient advocacy and systemic bias in medical care. Danielle was nervous about public speaking, but Marcus encouraged her. People need to hear from patients, he said. They need to hear what it's like from your perspective, not just from investigators and administrators who study these issues academically. So Danielle stood on that stage, looked out at an audience of healthcare professionals, and told her story. She told them about dismissive nurses and ignored concerns. She told them about the fear she'd felt knowing something was wrong and not being able to get anyone to listen. She told them about the investigation that had followed and the changes that had resulted. I don't want your sympathy, she concluded. I want your commitment. I want you to commit to listening when patients express concerns. I want you to commit to examining your own biases and how they might affect your treatment of patients. I want you to commit to creating systems where patients feel safe speaking up and where their voices are valued as expert input rather than dismissed as anxiety or overreaction. Because every patient deserves to be heard. Every patient deserves to be safe. And that only happens when medical professionals commit to providing truly equitable care. The applause was sustained and genuine. Afterward, dozens of healthcare workers approached her, some to apologize for their own failures, some to share their own experiences of trying to change systems from within, some to ask for advice on how to do better. One nurse, a young black woman who couldn't have been more than 25, approached with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for speaking up. I'm starting my career, and I've already seen so much of what you described. I needed to hear that it's okay to push back, that it's okay to advocate for patients even when it's uncomfortable. You've given me courage. Danielle hugged her, this young woman who reminded her so much of what Emily might have become if she'd been braver earlier in her career. Use that courage, Danielle told her. Your patients need you to be brave for them. That evening, back in their hotel room, Danielle and Marcus video called home to check on Maya, who was staying with Danielle's mother. Their daughter's face filled the screen, grinning and babbling excitedly about the park and the swings and the dog she'd seen. I miss you, baby girl, Danielle said, blowing kisses at the screen. Mama home soon? Maya asked, her toddler grammar still developing. Tomorrow, Danielle promised. Mama and Daddy will be home tomorrow. After the call ended, Danielle sat quietly for a moment, thinking about how much had changed since that terrifying day in the delivery room. How much she'd changed. She'd always thought of herself as a quiet person, someone who avoided conflict, who tried to keep the peace. But becoming a mother had awakened something fierce in her, something that refused to stay quiet when things were wrong. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, sitting beside her on the hotel bed. About voice, Danielle said. About how I almost didn't speak up because I was worried about being seen as difficult or dramatic. About how many women stay quiet because they're worried about the same thing. About how much changes when we decide that being heard matters more than being liked. You've helped a lot of women find their voices, Marcus said. You've shown them that speaking up matters. We've helped them, Danielle corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. without your knowledge of the system, without your understanding of how to navigate bureaucracy, without your willingness to use your professional expertise to help not just our family, but all those other families. That's what partnership is, Marcus said simply, using our different strengths to make things better together. 3 years after Maya's birth, they received an invitation that surprised them both. The hospital where Maya had been born was holding a dedication ceremony for their new patient safety and equity center, and they wanted Danielle and Marcus to attend as honored guests. They named it the Brooks Center, Marcus said, reading the invitation. After us. Danielle didn't know how to feel about that. On one hand, it represented real change, tangible evidence that their willingness to speak up had resulted in lasting improvements. On the other hand, it felt strange to be honored by the same institution that had failed them so badly. We should go, Marcus said. Not for them, but for all the patients who will benefit from the programs housed in that center. For all the women who will receive better care because of the changes that were made. So they went, bringing Maya with them. Their daughter was 3 now, old enough to be curious about where they were going, but not old enough to understand the significance of the occasion. Linda Matthews greeted them warmly, and Danielle noted that she seemed genuinely pleased to see them rather than uncomfortable with reminders of the hospital's past failures. So much has changed since you were here, Matthews said as she walked them through the new center. We have ongoing implicit bias training for all staff. We have a patient advocacy program that helps patients understand their rights and navigate the complaint process. We have community oversight of our quality improvement initiatives, and we have protocols that require escalation of patient concerns, with penalties for staff who fail to follow them. She showed them the training rooms, the patient meeting spaces, the resource library filled with information about patient rights and healthcare equity. It was impressive, undeniably so, evidence of real institutional change. We also have this, Matthews said, gesturing to a wall display. It featured photos and brief stories from patients who'd had positive experiences at the hospital, along with quotes about the importance of patient-centered care. And there, among the photos and stories, was a plaque. This center is dedicated to the principle that every patient deserves to be heard, the plaque read. Established in recognition of Danielle and Marcus Brooks, whose courage in speaking up helped create a culture of accountability and equity. Danielle felt tears prick her eyes. It wasn't about having their names on a building. It was about the tangible proof that speaking up had mattered, that their experience had been transformed into lasting change. During the dedication ceremony, several speakers talked about the importance of patient safety and healthcare equity. Physicians discussed how the training programs had changed their practices. Nurses talked about feeling empowered to advocate for patients. Community members spoke about feeling safer seeking care. Then it was Danielle's turn to speak. She stood at the podium, looked out at the audience of hospital staff and community members, and took a deep breath. 3 years ago, I came to this hospital to have my baby, she began. I was excited and nervous, the way any first-time mother would be. I trusted that I would receive good care, that my concerns would be heard, that I would be treated with dignity and respect. She paused, letting that sink in. I didn't receive good care. My concerns weren't heard. I wasn't treated with dignity and respect. And because of that, my daughter's life was put at risk. The room was completely silent. I could have stayed quiet about that experience. I could have been grateful that my baby was ultimately okay and moved on with my life. But I didn't stay quiet, because I kept thinking about the next woman who would walk through these doors, the next mother who would need someone to listen when she said something was wrong. I couldn't stay quiet, knowing that my silence might contribute to someone else's suffering. She looked directly at Linda Matthews. Change is hard. Change is uncomfortable. Nobody likes to admit they've been failing at something fundamental. This hospital could have fought the investigation. They could have minimized the findings. They could have done the bare minimum required and called it sufficient. But they didn't. They chose to use a moment of failure as an opportunity for transformation. And while that doesn't erase what happened to me, it does mean that my experience wasn't meaningless. It meant something. It created change. She paused again, gathering her thoughts. But I want to be clear about something. This center, these programs, these changed protocols, they shouldn't have required a state investigation to exist. They should have always been here. Every hospital should prioritize patient safety and equity without needing to be forced into it by external oversight. The fact that we're celebrating these changes today shouldn't be a feel-good story about how things worked out in the end. It should be a reminder of how many patients suffered before someone finally spoke loudly enough to force change. The silence in the room had taken on a different quality now, uncomfortable but attentive. So yes, I'm glad this center exists. I'm glad for the training programs and the oversight and the changed protocols. But I'm also challenging everyone here to think about what other failures might still be lurking in your systems. What other voices are being dismissed? What other patients are being failed? Because if you're only making changes when someone forces you to, you're not really committed to equity and safety. You're just responding to pressure. She softened her tone slightly. I know that healthcare is hard. I know that medical professionals are overworked and understressed and dealing with impossible situations every day. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for commitment. Commitment to listening. Commitment to questioning your own biases. Commitment to creating systems where patients feel safe speaking up and where their voices are genuinely valued. She looked out at the audience one more time. Thank you for this center. Thank you for the changes you've made. Now please, keep going. Keep improving. Keep listening. Keep making sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Because that's what real accountability looks like. The applause was measured, thoughtful, as if people were still processing what she'd said. That was fine. She didn't need applause. She needed commitment. After the ceremony, several people approached to thank her or ask questions. One nurse, an older white woman, spoke with particular intensity. I was here when you delivered, she said. I wasn't assigned to your care, but I heard about what happened afterward. And I want you to know that some of us were horrified. Some of us had been trying to raise concerns about Karen for years. But we didn't know how to be heard either. What's different now? Danielle asked. Now, there are actual systems in place, the nurse said. Now when we raise concerns, they're investigated rather than dismissed. Now there's accountability. It's not perfect, but it's so much better than it was. Another nurse, a younger Latina woman, approached with a story about how the new training had helped her recognize her own biases and change how she communicated with patients. I didn't think I had biases, she said. I thought I treated everyone the same. But the training helped me see all the small ways I was making assumptions, all the ways I was dismissing certain patients' concerns more readily than others. It was uncomfortable to confront that, but I'm a better nurse because of it. As they were leaving, Maya tugged on Danielle's hand. Mama, why were you talking to all those people? She asked. I was telling them a story, Danielle said. About when you were born. Was it a good story? Danielle thought about that question. Was it a good story? It was a true story. An important story. A story that had resulted in meaningful change. But was it good? It's a story about being brave, she finally said. About speaking up even when it's hard. And about how one person's voice can help lots of other people. I like brave stories, Maya declared. Me too, baby girl, Danielle said, picking her daughter up for a hug. Me too. As they drove home that evening, Maya fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the long day. Danielle turned around to look at her daughter, studying her peaceful sleeping face. She won't remember any of this, she said to Marcus. She won't remember the hospital where she was born, or the center named after us, or the speech I gave today. No, Marcus agreed. But she'll grow up in a world that's a little bit better because of what you did. Because of what we did together. And that matters, even if she never knows the specific details. Do you ever regret it? Danielle asked. Getting filing the complaint, pushing for change. It took so much time and energy. There were so many uncomfortable conversations and difficult moments. Never, Marcus said firmly. Not once. Because every time I look at Maya, I think about all the other Mayas being born right now, all the other mothers in labor who deserve to be heard and respected. And I think about how speaking up might have made things just a little bit safer for them. That's not something I'd ever regret. Danielle reached over and squeezed his hand. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, Marcus replied. And I'm proud of your courage, of your willingness to use your voice, of everything you've done to turn a terrible experience into positive change. That night, after Maya was in bed and the house was quiet, Danielle sat at her computer and opened her email. There were several messages from women in the support group she'd started, sharing updates about their own journeys toward healing and advocacy. One message in particular caught her attention. It was from Sandra, Jasmine's mother, the first woman Danielle had helped beyond her own case. I wanted to let you know that the hospital where I delivered finally responded to my complaint, Sandra wrote. It took a year, but they've agreed to implement new protocols for pain management during labor, particularly for women of color. They're also requiring all staff to complete enhanced training on implicit bias and cultural competency. It's not as comprehensive as what your hospital did, but it's a start. And none of it would have happened if you hadn't helped me understand that my voice mattered, that speaking up was possible. Thank you for showing me the way. Danielle felt tears slide down her cheeks. This was why it mattered. This was why the discomfort and difficult conversations and exhausting advocacy work were worth it. Because change created more change. Because one woman finding her voice helped other women find theirs. Because speaking up was contagious in the best possible way. She typed a response to Sandra. I'm so proud of you. You did this. You found your voice and used it to create change. Now think about all the women who will labor at that hospital and receive better care because you refused to stay silent. You've made such a difference. Over the following years, Danielle and Marcus continued their advocacy work, though in smaller, more sustainable ways as Maya grew and their lives became busier. Danielle still facilitated the monthly support group. Marcus still consulted with families navigating complaint processes, always careful to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. And together, they spoke occasionally at conferences or community events about their experience and what they'd learned about creating systemic change. Maya started kindergarten, bringing home drawings and stories and an endless stream of questions about how the world worked. She was bright and curious and fearless, traits that Danielle encouraged, even when they made parenting more exhausting. Why do some people get treated differently? Maya asked one day after a discussion at school about fairness. Because people have biases, Danielle explained carefully. They have ideas in their heads about different groups of people, and sometimes those ideas affect how they treat others. That's not fair, Maya said firmly. No, it's not, Danielle agreed. But the good news is that we can work to change those biases. We can speak up when we see unfair treatment. We can help create systems that work better for everyone. Like you did when I was born, Maya asked. She'd heard simplified versions of the story, age-appropriate explanations of how her parents had helped make the hospital safer. Exactly like that, Danielle confirmed. When I grow up, I want to help people too, Maya announced. You can help people now, Danielle said. You don't have to wait until you're grown up. Anytime you see someone being treated unfairly, anytime you notice someone needs help, you can speak up. Your voice matters, Maya. Even as a kid, your voice matters. 5 years after Maya's birth, Danielle received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Danielle Brooks? The Danielle Brooks who spoke at the Healthcare Equity Conference 3 years ago?" "Yes." Danielle confirmed, curious. "My name is Dr. Jennifer Martinez. I'm a researcher studying maternal mortality and morbidity, particularly racial disparities in birth outcomes. I've been following your story and the changes that resulted from your advocacy. Would you be willing to participate in a research study about patient-initiated systemic change in healthcare? Danielle agreed, intrigued. Over the next few months, she participated in several interviews, providing detailed information about her experience, the complaint process, and the subsequent changes at the hospital. Dr. Martinez was particularly interested in understanding what factors had enabled Danielle to successfully advocate for change when so many other patients' complaints went nowhere. Your husband's professional expertise was clearly a factor, Dr. Martinez noted during one interview. But I think there's more to it than that. You had something that many patients lack, the confidence to persist even when you were being dismissed. Where did that come from? Danielle thought about the question. I think it came from being a teacher, she said slowly. I'm used to advocating for children who can't fully advocate for themselves. I'm used to navigating systems and pushing back against policies that don't serve students well. So when I needed to advocate for myself and my baby, I drew on those same skills. I knew how to be persistent without being aggressive. I knew how to document concerns and follow proper channels. I knew that systems could be changed if you understood how they worked and where to apply pressure. That's fascinating, Dr. Martinez said. Most of the research on patient advocacy focuses on medical literacy or social capital. But professional skills from seemingly unrelated fields might be just as important. The study was eventually published, and it included Danielle's case as one example of successful patient-initiated change. The research identified several factors that increased the likelihood of complaints resulting in meaningful reform. Detailed documentation, professional expertise in navigating bureaucratic systems, persistence in the face of dismissal, access to resources, and allies within the healthcare system willing to support change efforts. But here's the problem, Dr. Martinez said when she presented the findings to Danielle. Most patients don't have these advantages. Most patients don't have husbands who work in healthcare oversight. Most patients don't have professional experience navigating complex systems. Most patients don't have the time or energy to persist through months of complaint processes while caring for a newborn. So while your case created important change, it also highlights how difficult it is for average patients to achieve similar outcomes. So what's the solution? Danielle asked. We need to change the systems so that patients don't have to be extraordinary to receive basic respect and safety, Dr. Martinez said. Your case shouldn't be remarkable. The fact that it is tells us how broken the system is. That conversation stuck with Danielle. She'd always known that she and Marcus had advantages that many patients lacked, but hearing it articulated in the context of research made it even clearer. She'd been able to create change not just because she'd been brave or persistent, but because she'd had resources and knowledge that many patients simply didn't have. She started thinking about how to bridge that gap. How could patients who lacked those advantages still have their voices heard? How could the system be changed so that you didn't need to be married to a healthcare investigator to receive appropriate care? She approached Marcus with an idea. What if we created a guide? Something that walks patients through the complaint process step by step, explains their rights, provides template letters and documentation forms, lists resources for support. Something that gives them the tools they need to advocate for themselves effectively. Marcus loved the idea. Together, they spent months creating a comprehensive patient advocacy toolkit. It included information about patient rights during labor and delivery, guidance on documenting concerns, step-by-step instructions for filing complaints with hospitals and state agencies, template letters for various situations, and resources for legal aid and patient advocacy organizations. They made it available for free online, and they partnered with community organizations to distribute printed copies in neighborhoods that might have limited internet access. They also created versions in Spanish and several other languages, recognizing that language barriers could be an additional obstacle to effective advocacy. The response was overwhelming. Within months, they were receiving emails from people across the country who'd used the toolkit to file their own complaints, to challenge dismissive treatment, to demand better care. Some of the stories were heartbreaking. Patients who'd suffered serious harm because their concerns had been ignored. But increasingly, the stories were also hopeful. Patients who'd been able to advocate effectively, who'd gotten appropriate care, who'd helped create change in their own communities. One email in particular moved Danielle to tears. It was from a woman named Rachel in Ohio, who'd used the toolkit to file a complaint about her care during childbirth. The hospital had investigated and found that her concerns were valid. The nurse who'd dismissed her pain had been required to complete additional training, and the hospital had implemented new protocols for pain management. But the most important thing, Rachel wrote, is that my daughter was in the room when I made the phone call to file the complaint. She was 8 years old, and she heard me speak up about being treated poorly. She heard me refuse to accept dismissive care. And afterward, she said, "Mommy, you were really brave." I want her to grow up knowing that women's voices matter, that our concerns deserve to be taken seriously, that we don't have to accept being dismissed or disrespected. Thank you for giving me the tools to show her that. Danielle shared the email with Marcus that evening. He read it silently, then looked up with tears in his own eyes. "This is what legacy looks like," he said. "Not buildings or plaques or recognition, but other people finding their voices because you found yours first. We found ours together," Danielle corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Partnership, Marcus said, echoing what he'd said years earlier. Using our different strengths to make things better. Maya came running into the room, now a boisterous 7-year-old with scraped knees and an endless supply of energy. "Mama, Daddy, come play with me," she demanded. They closed the laptop and went to play with their daughter, building elaborate structures with blocks that Maya delighted in knocking down and rebuilding. This was life now. Advocacy work balanced with normal family moments. Big picture systemic change work balanced with the daily joy of raising a child. Later that night, after Maya was asleep, Danielle stood in her daughter's doorway, watching her sleep, thinking about the journey that had started in a hospital delivery room 7 years ago. She thought about the fear she'd felt, the dismissal she'd experienced, the anger that had driven her to demand accountability. But mostly, she thought about all the women who'd found their voices since then. All the complaints filed, all the changes made, all the systems improved, because someone had decided that speaking up mattered more than staying comfortable. She thought about Karen Whitfield, the nurse who'd dismissed her concerns. Danielle had learned that Karen had never worked as a nurse again after being terminated. Part of Danielle felt bad about that. She'd never wanted to destroy anyone's career. But a larger part recognized that Karen's termination had sent a message to healthcare workers everywhere. Patient concerns matter, and failing to take them seriously has consequences. She thought about Emily Ross, who'd completed her training and was now, according to LinkedIn, a patient safety advocate at a different hospital. Emily had turned her own failure into a commitment to doing better, to helping other nurses learn from her mistakes. She thought about Dr. Pierce, who'd published an article in a medical journal about recognizing implicit bias in obstetric care, using Danielle's case with permission as an example of how dismissing patient concerns could lead to poor outcomes. She thought about Linda Matthews, who'd become a vocal advocate for patient safety and healthcare equity, speaking at national conferences about the importance of creating systems that encouraged rather than punished patient complaints. She thought about Sharon, the kind nurse who'd been the first person to treat her with real compassion after Maya's birth. Sharon had been promoted to nursing supervisor and was now responsible for training new nurses, using Danielle's story as a case study in the importance of patient-centered care. She thought about Sarah Chen, the investigator who'd conducted the state review, who'd taken Danielle's concerns seriously and done the thorough work needed to document systemic failures. She thought about Dr. Martinez, whose research was helping to identify the barriers that kept most patients from being able to advocate effectively. She thought about Sandra and all the other women in the support group who'd found their own voices and created their own changes. She thought about Rachel in Ohio and all the other people across the country who'd used the toolkit to demand better treatment. And she thought about Marcus, her partner in all of this, who'd used his professional expertise and personal commitment to help transform a traumatic experience into meaningful change. One person speaking up had started a ripple effect that was still spreading, still creating change, still helping patients find their voices years later. This was the real story, not just what had happened in that delivery room, but what had happened afterward. Not just the injustice, but the response to it. Not just the harm, but the healing that came through demanding accountability. Danielle went back to her own bedroom where Marcus was already asleep. She climbed into bed beside him, and he stirred slightly, reaching for her hand even in his sleep. She thought about making sure Maya understood this story as she got older. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The fear, the dismissal, the fight for accountability, the ongoing work of creating change. Because Maya needed to understand that speaking up was possible and important, but also that it was hard and required persistence and courage. She wanted her daughter to grow up knowing that systems could be changed, but that they didn't change easily or automatically. That making things better required people willing to push through discomfort, to persist in the face of resistance, to keep speaking up even when it would be easier to stay quiet. She wanted Maya to understand that her voice mattered. Not because her father was important or because her mother had become an advocate, but simply because she was a person whose experiences and concerns deserved to be heard. As Danielle drifted off to sleep, she felt at peace. The anger that had driven her initially had transformed into something more sustainable, a commitment to ongoing change, a willingness to use her voice to help others find theirs, and a deep belief that systems could be made better when people refused to accept harm as inevitable. The story that had started with nurses laughing and mocking a pregnant woman during labor had become a story about courage, accountability, systemic change, and the power of refusing to stay silent. And that story was still being written, one patient voice at a time. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, like this video, and share it with others who need to hear this message. Your engagement helps ensure that stories like this reach more people and inspire more change. Remember, your voice matters, your concerns deserve to be heard, and speaking up can create ripples of change that extend far beyond your own experience. Thank you for watching.